Okay, so we'll make a start. My name's Lynn. I'm a member of the Children, Youth and Family team. I'm going to disappear from your screens in a little while, but I'll be keeping an eye on chat and the Q&A function. This is a Zoom webinar, which means that we can't see you. So we won't be able to see your lovely faces, but if you want to engage with us, if you want to ask questions of our presenter, then please do post those in Q&A and I will monitor them. We're going to be together this evening for just under an hour, and if we've got time in the lead up to 8 o'clock, then we'll put some of your questions to Naomi, who's joining us from an organisation called Growing Hope. Growing Hope provides free therapy to children and young people with additional needs and works quite closely with several churches. And Naomi is an occupational therapist who has a PhD in play for children with cerebral palsy. So we're really, really glad to have Naomi here with us to share some of her wisdom this evening as we talk about helping people to tune into God regardless of age or ability. I'm going to pass over to Naomi in a minute, but just to let you know that we will record this session and make it available afterwards to watch again as well on the Well Learning Hub YouTube channel. So without any further ado, I'm going to stop talking and hand over to Naomi so that she can share with you this evening. Thanks, Naomi.
Thanks, amazing. Thank you so much, Lynn. I'll just share with you all. Hopefully you can see that there. So welcome. Today we're going to be thinking about how we pray and respond to God for all ages and abilities. Okay, let me just make sure I'm clicking on. Here we go. So just to tell you a bit more about Growing Hope, that's our website if you're interested in finding out more. But as Lynn said, we provide free therapy clinics for children and people with additional needs in partnership with local churches across the UK. And that's my contact email. If you have any further questions, happy to answer any questions that you might have specifically. As a charity, we aim to grow hope for children. So we provide free therapy, whether that's occupational therapy, physiotherapy, music therapy, speech language therapy, children's counselling. In our day-to-day services, we aim to grow hope for families. So we provide lots of groups for parents and carers and for siblings, because we really recognise that it's important for the whole family to have an opportunity to discuss their experience and connect with one another. We run a course called When Dreams Change, which is all about parents and carers having the opportunity to talk about their experience of their hopes and dreams for their child with additional needs, having to change and adjust because of their child's needs. So we look at the grief cycle and how they can get support and that kind of thing. That's a course that we actually train people to facilitate. So if that's something you're interested in, then do get in touch and I can give you more information. We aim to grow hope in Jesus. So we're an openly Christian charity. We offer to pray for all the clients who come. And one of the amazing things is that, you know, although a vast majority of people, families that we see in clinic aren't Christians, so many of them are open to prayer, which is great. And we also offer to support people to attend church if that's something they want to do. So that's Growing Hope, and yeah, a bit about what I do in my day to day. But we're talking about connecting with God and supporting children and young people to connect with God. So who can connect with God? Well, the answer in my mind is everyone and anyone, and that's what this is about. I really love this passage in Ephesians 3, which says, so that Christ may dwell in your hearts through faith, that you, being rooted and grounded in love, may have strength to comprehend with all the saints what's the breadth and length and height and depth, and to know the love of Christ that surpasses knowledge, that you may be filled with all the fullness of God. Now, the reason that I put that passage on there is that that phrase, love that surpasses knowledge, I think really stands out to me, and I have found it really helpful to reflect on the way that we can have relationship with God, whoever we are and whatever our ability. I've actually written a book called Love Surpassing Knowledge, which is all about all of this stuff. So if you want, you can read that if you want any even more details. But the reason is that I've met so many children and young people who actually in the world's eyes can't do very much. So there's one particular little girl who couldn't walk, couldn't talk, couldn't eat, by herself, like needed support for all of those things. And yet she carried with her the most incredible sense of God's peace and God's presence wherever she went. Even though in the world's eyes she was someone who couldn't bring very much, in God's eyes she was incredible, was able to really experience him and share him with others, despite not having verbal communication or any of the things that you might expect someone to have. And she really sadly died, but at her funeral, person after person after person got up and said, I know more of God and I know more of being in God's presence because I met, we'll call her Abby. And that was the same experience for me. Being with her just taught me more of God's peace and God's presence. And for me, that story really reminds me that whoever we are and whatever way we're presenting ourselves, we can connect with God and we can experience him and we can lead other people into his kingdom. So that's why I care about it. And Jesus shows us that he shows us so many different ways that he does things that are unexpected, where he turns society kind of on its head. He welcomes children in Mark 10. He touches people who have leprosy, something that would be an absolute no-no. He sees Zacchaeus in the tree and welcomes him, invites himself for dinner. He talks to the woman at the well. All of these people are individuals who probably would have been pushed to the edges of society. And when we think about welcoming and supporting all individuals, regardless of their age, stage, and ability, to hear from God and to know his voice and to be able to communicate with him, more often than not, the people who might be pushed to the edges are those who have some kind of additional need, whether that's a learning need, a physical need, a mental health need, an undiagnosed need, or maybe just, because they're young, people don't think they can, or whatever reason it is. But what we see in Jesus is that whoever you are, whether you're a child, whether you have leprosy or another illness, whether you like Zacchaeus or the woman at the well, God wants to welcome you and speak to you. And that's what we want to reflect to all of the children and young people that we support. So, bit of a weird one for you. We're going to launch into a bit more of a practical kind of backgroundy bit. As an occupational therapist, I talk a lot about sensory processing and have learned a lot about sensory processing, which is basically the way that our brain understands and responds to the world around us. But the thing is that if we understand a bit more about that, we can understand a bit more about how we can enable children and young people to listen to and respond to God in different ways. So what I'd love you to do is just yourself, normally we would do this kind of in pairs, but because you're virtual, just yourself, have a little think. If you've got a pen and pencil, you could write it down. What do you do in your morning routine? Do you have a tea, coffee? Do you have to have 5 minutes before you gonna get out of bed? Do you hit snooze lots of times, or do you ping up out of bed and carry on? Do you go for a run? Do you what kind of things do you do? Have a little think. I'll just give you a second to do that. Amazing. So the idea of doing that is just that it shows you that actually we all have different preferences, and normally we would feed that back. And what you'll find is that some people need an hour to get ready, some people get ready in 15 minutes, some people have to have that cup of tea or that time alone, or some people love to go for a run. But all the things we do in our morning routine, we do them on a kind of subconscious, not subconscious level because we know we're doing them, but subconsciously what we're doing is we're helping our brain to feel regulated, and we're helping get ourselves ready for the day. I don't know about you, but if you've ever had this happen, I've had moments where I've totally missed my alarm or not set it for some reason, or something has gone really wrong, and the rest of my day feels absolutely thrown. And that's often because obviously that's a kind of stressful event, but also not having those things that help you get ready for your day can have an impact on your morning routine. So when we talk about senses, what are we talking about? So you may have heard me talk about this before, you may not have, but we have actually 8 senses. There's probably 5 that you know about, but we're going to talk about 8 this evening. So your auditory sense, your sense of hearing, is about information that you take in through your ears. Now, we see God in the Bible, don't we? We see him speak to his people. We see Jesus sit with the disciples and everybody on the Sermon on the Mount and say, you know, look at the birds of the air. They don't worry. You don't need to worry. We can take in information through our ears. We can hear and respond to God through the things that we hear. We have our sense of sight, which is our visual sense about information through our eyes. And we see Jesus use, you know, physical examples for people, like faith as small as a mustard seed can move that mountain over there. We're able to see things tangibly, and we're going to think of some examples of how we can do that in a bit, but we can use that as a way to pray. And often, I don't know about you, but I often find that seeing things and noticing things in the environment around me, whether that's when I'm outdoors or when I'm praying for an individual, can be really helpful. And that's something that we can really teach children and young people to be able to do, to be able to see things and think, oh, like, God, what are you saying to me through what I can see? Our sense of smell is our olfactory sense. That's about information received through our nose. And the really interesting thing about our sense of smell is that in terms of your brain, it's a part of your limbic system, so it's closely linked to your memory. And that's why if you close your eyes for a second and think of a really great memory, you can probably think of a smell that is associated with that memory. And that's because our smell is so closely linked to our memory. And one of the things I love about that, the way that God has done that in our brains, is that I wonder how many times in the Bible the incredible things that Jesus has done, or, you know, throughout history, where there's a distinct smell where that has enabled people to remember God and remember his story in their lives. So if you think about the feeding of the 5,000, I don't actually like the smell of fish, but, you know, I can imagine it would have really smelled of fish. But as a common part of the diet in that time, maybe every time people had a meal after that, they would have smelled that smell and been like, oh yeah, like, remember that incredible time when Jesus provided all of that fish for us. So smell is something that we can use, you know, when we're interacting with children and people, when we're giving them the opportunity to listen to God and hear what he's saying. Having a distinct smell might help them to then remember what God said later on, or it might help them to connect with a particular story of God's faithfulness or of what he might be doing. Okay, and then we have our sense of taste. So taste is our gustatory sense. So that's about information received through our tongue. And, you know, it's an important sense. We probably all enjoy using it. If you have children and young people who can't eat things physically, often they can still do taste on their lips, which is really cool. But our sense of taste is in the Bible, you know, in the Psalms, it says, taste and see that the Lord is good. And I think it's a really cool one in terms of, yeah, enabling people to engage in the story. You know, you can make bread and taste it and think about all of those passages where Jesus talks about being the bread of life, or that kind of thing. Our sense of touch is our tactile sense. It's about information received through different layers of our skin. So we're actually coming to the more foundational senses now, and I'm going to show you a diagram in a minute which describes why they're important. Excuse me. But with your sense of touch, what you might like to do is get your sleeve out, your arm out if you'd like to. You obviously don't have to if you don't want to, and see if you can hover your hand just slightly above your skin. And it, because it touches the hairs on your skin, it probably feels a bit like, oh, that's light tickly touch. That's a kind of alerting touch that we often don't really like the feeling of. If you then rub it or use a whole hand, that's deep pressure touch, and that is calming, and it's going to feel much nicer. And the way that touch works is you actually have two touch pathways. So you have a protective pathway, which develops in the womb, which tells you about pain and temperature, and then you have a discriminative pathway which tells you about different properties and types of touch. And what we know about this sense of touch is that often children who are quite defensive to touch, so we often see this in children with autism or sensory needs, you might brush past them and they might go ow and not like the touch. And that's because they're experiencing the touch through this protective pathway, which tells them about pain and temperature. So what we can do is we can help children to be able to experience touch through their discriminative pathway, which often happens. Interestingly, the children who are often saying ow are the children who want to touch everything. But that's because when we're in control, it's easier for us to use that discriminative pathway. But what we want to do is enable children to use that pathway more and enable that kind of experience. So that could be something like wrapping up really tightly in a blanket and praying like, God, thank you that you are our protector. Thank you that you hem me in, that you go before me. And there are so many times when we see touch. God speaks through touch in the Bible, aren't there? You know, Jesus, we talked about that just a minute ago, touching and healing the lepers, or just people walking and talking and holding objects and experiencing God through what they're holding. Balance is our vestibular sense, so that's about information received actually through our inner ear, and we can see where God speaks through that kind of vestibular sense, particularly in the moments of stopping. I think, you know, I'm sure you guys have a similar experience of kind of doing lots of things and trying to manage lots of different bits and pieces, but often when we take that moment, like it says in Psalm 46, to be still and know that God is God, when we take that time to stop, it can really enable us to to reconnect with God and hear what he's saying to us and to be able to respond to him. And those moments where we stop moving and physically stop alert something in our brains which helps us to kind of reconnect with the fact that we have stopped moving. So the last two, your experience kind of sense is your interoceptive sense. So it's like an internal sense, which is about your internal organs. So it's whether you feel hungry or sick or need the toilet. And that's kind of coming up in research quite a lot at the moment, but there's not loads about it. But I think that's that sense of kind of that inner sense of peace, really, or of knowing God with you when you kind of know inside you, like that presence of Jesus that Abby was carrying that other people could feel. I feel like that's where we feel that in our interoceptive sense. And then our moving sense, our body awareness, is our sense of proprioception. And I'm always talking about proprioception because it's a really important sense, which I will explain about in a minute. But that is about how fast, not how fast, sorry, that's a vestibular one. That's about where my body is in space. So if I put my arm here and I look at, I close my eyes, I can copy it with this other arm, and because I know where my body is in space. I don't have to look at where my elbow is to be able to make my other elbow do the same, because I know where my body is. So my sense of proprioception, my sense of body awareness, is from proprioceptors, receptors inside my joints, which are sending signals to my brain and telling me where my body is. So without looking right now, you can tell me whether your legs are crossed or not crossed, whether you're holding a pen or not, and that's because of your proprioceptive sense. And the cool thing about this sense is that it's really regulating, it's kind of calming, and it helps us to be able to concentrate. And so often when we're doing movement activities or when we are moving around, we experience more like increased ability to be able to hear and listen. So I don't know about you, but often it's easier to have a difficult conversation when we're walking and talking with somebody, or when we're doing something that can make it easier. And we see Jesus, you know, walk and talk with his disciples, get in the boat with his disciples, climb up the mountain with his disciples, and often he's moving and talking. And I think the cool thing about that is we can know God in that process of movement, as well as just you know, hearing what he's saying whilst we're moving. So this is the diagram that I was mentioning, it's part of a program called How Does Your Engine Run, for self-regulation, which is a kind of occupational therapy program. But what it does is, I'm not sure if you can see my mouse, I think you probably can, but at the bottom here you've got all of your senses. Now they're the like funny scientific names, but you've got your sense of touch, your sense of balance, your sense of body awareness right there at the foundation. Then your sense of taste, your hearing, your sight, and your smell. But what we can see is that learning is right at the very top of this pyramid, which means that in terms of our kids and youth ministry, taking anything in at an academic level actually takes quite a lot of other skills for our children and young people. But the really cool thing about this is that actually what we know about learning is that we can learn through these senses. So whether we have that kind of academic understanding or not, we can experience God. Our brains can connect with him and know what he's saying just through these senses at the bottom. And we also know that the more of these senses we use and the more of these senses we kind of engage children in, the more they're going to be able to join in, basically. So that's what we're going to have a think about. So you'll see on this, you'll see on this slide, I was trying to get it so that I could see the top of it, but I can just about see it. This has all of the senses, well, 7 of the senses along the bottom, because we don't really know enough about that interoceptive sense yet. And it's talking about the things that are calming and the things that are alerting. Now, obviously, if you have a busy youth or children's group and they're kind of all running around, or half of them might be slouched on the floor, or half of you're trying to engage them, it's good for you to know the kind of activities which are going to be calming and the kind of activities which are going to be alerting and bring them up and help them to feel more engaged. And we need a balance of those things, don't we? There'll be times for both. But this kind of gives you a summary, and obviously the thing about this is it's actually quite difficult to generalize all of these things, but this gives you a kind of general picture of how our brains tend to respond, and then within it there'll be individual preferences and things that people find different. So with your sense of sight, which is the way that we see, we know that geometric or plane shapes can be calming, and busy and flashing things can be alerting. And that's why, so a really helpful point for that is if we're trying to engage children and all young people in a prayer activity or enabling them to engage with hearing God's voice, it's important to think about distraction as well. One of the things that I'll do when I'm in clinic is I'll always sit with my back to a white wall, because I know that the things that people can see behind me are going to be distracting, like particularly for children with autism or some specific additional needs where visual stuff can be really quite triggering. So it's important to think, okay, what is the environment like? What am I showing people when I'm doing this activity? With our sense of smell, we know things like vanilla and lavender are calming, and we know things like pungent and strong smells are going to be alerting. With our sense of taste, we know things like vanilla, lavender, chocolate are all calming, and things that are spicy or sour or lemon are going to be alerting. And there's a really interesting thing with our mouth that is important. I don't know if any of you are doing this because I can't see you, so less reason to be self-conscious, but often when people are listening, they might touch their face or put their hand on their mouth, and that's because our mouths are a really sensitive area of our body. As a baby, we learn by putting lots of things in our mouth. But the interesting thing about that is that if we give our mouth this proprioceptive input, which I'm going to talk about in a minute, but any kind of movement, so anything chewy or crunchy, that's always going to be kind of regulating for us. That can be both calming and alerting. So if we're in a room and we give all the children something really chewy to crunch on, to munch on. Those who are a bit sleepy are going to kind of be a bit more alert, and those who are running around the room are going to be a bit calmer. So that can be a really good, if you're doing something around taste and see that God is good, and you've got parents' consent to give them all a sweet, something that's really chewy can actually be really good, because it can help children and young people to really like have the time and the regulation to be able to listen to what God might be saying to them through that kind of feeling. With our sense of hearing, our auditory sense, we know that anything rhythmic and steady is going to be calming. And obviously, we kind of do that without even realizing that we're doing that. But the way that we use our voice, the way that we use music, the way that we engage people in what's going on has an impact in the way that we're able to hear and listen and respond to God. And alerting is busy and changing music, changing tempo, that kind of thing. Touch, I've actually already talked about this. So alerting is light, tickly touch. Calming is deep pressure touch. With your sense of balance, your vestibular sense, we know that linear movement in one direction is calming, and stop-start movement is alerting. So, or rotating. Lots of children might spin, and that can be quite an alerting thing. If you've got children who spin and find it difficult to sit down, and doing more heavy work movement can be helpful. And so I've just written heavy work there under proprioception, that basically any movement activity that puts pressure through your joints is going to be both calming and alerting. So for example, things like doing jumping, walking like an animal, walking like a crab, playing crab football, walking like a bear, doing some stretching, pushing the wall, having those crunchy snacks we were talking about, giving yourself a big hug. That's one I use quite a lot. Any of those things, lifting up the pile of Bibles and carrying it somewhere, putting a chair somewhere, doing some digging in the ground and thanking God for his creation. All of those things are proprioceptive heavy work and are regulating for us. But the cool thing about that, if they're regulating, is that it means that it might be a way that more children and young people can engage with God. And we might do that through something like, building a tower and throwing a ball at it and praying that God would help us feel bold and courageous like Joshua. So there are some ideas. Let's give a few things a try and have a think through some more ideas. So play and pray, I've written there because so often I think, and it depends what age you're working with, whether it's children or young people. If you're working with really young children, or just anyone, to be honest, but if you're kind of, this is the idea of like just connecting with God in the everyday. So if I'm with young children and they're playing around, I might be with a young child who is looking at a mirror, and I might be praying over them like, God, I pray that as they see their reflection, they would know that you're inside them and they can reflect you wherever they go. Or if there's a child playing with a car, I might pray like, God, I pray that they would know you as they move between different activities. Or if there's and you could do this out loud or in your head, or you could be encouraging children to do it themselves as they're kind of going about their things. If they're rocking a dolly, I might pray, God, I pray that they would know that they're as cared for as they're caring for this dolly. All sorts of different things you can use as a way to listen to God and respond to what you feel like he's saying. So what I'd love you to do, I'm going to give you a couple of minutes of just quiet, and what I'd like you to do is just spend a moment I'll pray for us, fixing your eyes on Jesus, and then I'd love you to just ask God to draw your eyes to something in your room, in the room that you're in, or or maybe out your window if you can see out your window, and just ask him what he's speaking to you through what you can see. And I've done this quite a few times with children and young people, and it's amazing to see the kind of things that God says. And I think often, you know, the kind of thing of picking up an object is that whether a child or young person can understand, you know, if they've got additional needs and a learning disability, which means they don't understand the concept of, or haven't developed language of, okay, we're asking God what he's saying through these objects, they might actually still be able to pick something up and give it to someone, which really means something, and God can speak through that. So that can be an opportunity to enable children and young people of all abilities to be able to listen to what God's saying and respond. And, you know, listening to what God's saying and responding probably won't always look like the way that it might look in our heads. You know, God can respond, God can speak to us, and we can chat back to him when we're running around and playing football, or when we're, you know, in the middle of our play activities. So it's about being able to notice the moments that we see God speaking. So I'm going to pray for us, and then I'd love you, I'm just going to give it 2 minutes, and I'd love you to have a look around the room and find an object and ask God what he's saying to you through it. So Jesus, I just thank you that you are with us. God, I thank you that you're a God who loves each and every single individual, that you have created us, that you formed us in your image, that you've knitted us together in our mother's womb. I thank you that you speak to us through so many different things, and I thank you that we can use our eyes, and we can use the objects around us, and we can touch and see and feel different things, and you can speak to us through that. So Lord, I just pray that as we give this a try now, God, I pray that you would be speaking. I pray that you would open our eyes to see what it is that you see, and that you would be drawing us closer to you and helping us hear what it is you're saying as we do that. Amen. So I'll just give you 2 minutes to do. Great. I don't know what object you found, but I felt I was led to this. I've got a candle which has a bee on it, and I guess it's kind of a play on words, but I just felt God remind me of that "be still" verse in Psalm 46, of taking a moment to be still and to hear what he's saying to me. And you know, there'll be all sorts of things that children and young people see and hear God saying. And obviously, one of the important things when we're talking to children and young people about hearing from God and hearing what he's saying is that God always speaks in a way that is going to you know, be in line with what it says in the Bible, and bring us courage and you know, be in line with God's character. So just making sure that you've kind of laid out those ground rules first can be really helpful. Proprioception, made to move. I just want to just quickly do something with you which will help you to see how helpful proprioception can be. So I want you to see if you can touch 2 pointer fingers, see if you can touch them above your head without looking, fast as you can. Don't know if you missed or didn't miss. I often miss, very good at missing. But now what I want you to do is pretend you've got a fly in your hand, and then push your hands together as hard as you can. And normally if I was with young people, I'd count to 10. And then I want you to see if you can put one hand facing the ceiling. Don't do this if you should have said that before. If you've got a shoulder or arm injury, then obviously don't do things that are going to hurt you. One hand facing the ceiling, one hand facing the floor. Link your fingers together and then pull as hard as you can without letting go and hitting someone who's on the sofa next to you. And then see if you can do it the other way. That's it. And then see if you can give yourself a big hug. And this one is very tricky and only works if you're on a hard chair, not like a sofa. But you have to see if you can put your hands underneath your bottom and lift your bottom and your feet off the floor by pushing up on your hands. It's very tricky. I can't do it for very long. But now what I'd like you to do is see if you can get 2 fingers and try that again. And it should be a bit easier. It's often a bit easier. And for me, if it wasn't easier, don't panic, that's totally fine. But what you probably will find is that you can feel your shoulders a bit more, you can feel your hands a bit more. You've probably kind of become a bit more alert. You might have sat up a bit more, you're able to engage more. And that's because of the way that movement input impacts our brain and our body and enables us to respond. So we can do movement activities that enable us to enable the kids and young people that we're with to connect with God. So that might be going on a prayer walk. It might be building that tower and knocking it down. It might be, you know, playing a game of football, and every time you kick the ball, you say thank you to God for something. It might be, you know, going on a run with somebody and praying for them as you move. Or it might even just be, you know, doing stretches with a kid who has cerebral palsy and speaking God's words over them as you do that. It can be so many different things. Prayer buttons are a really good way of enabling kids and young people, particularly those with additional needs, to connect with God. But we use these with lots of our children. So the kind of 6 month to you know, 4 or 5, we have prayer buttons that kids can press to engage in prayer. So this is slightly different to these. These are called big point buttons. This one, I'm not sure what it's called, but they're all audio record buttons. So you can record a prayer on it, and then when you press it, thank you, God, that you're with me and you hold me close. You probably couldn't hear that, but it said, thank you, God, that you're with me and that you hold me close. So a child might press that, and we then might lay hands on them and pray for them. And it might be whilst they're, you know, wrapping in a blanket, so they can feel that sense of God holding them close at the same time. But they can be a way of engaging children and people in prayer. Also super motivating, because they can record their own prayers. You know, anyone can press them. It's a good activity to engage lots of people in. I can't remember what I wrote at the top of my PowerPoint, and I can't see it because of the Zoom bar. But this is a way that we can use visuals to help children and young people to think about the way that we chat to God. This is kind of like a social story. So social stories are basically kind of simplified language with images that help individuals with learning disabilities or particular additional needs to be able to understand. But if you look at this, it kind of explains the way that we can talk to and listen from God. So it says we can chat to God, we can listen to what God says back, we can tell him anything that we like. He may speak to us with a feeling in our body. He may help us think of a word or a picture in our heads, or he may be with us when we're playing. God loves chatting with us, and he is always speaking, and we can tune into him. And that's the kind of thing that you could use to read through with children and people. So some more ideas: you can do things like soaking, you can do prayers with bubbles, so blowing bubbles and like praying thank you prayers as you blow them, or just blowing them over children. We have this amazing moment at New One with some kids in our place, which was the additional needs area for kids, where at the end of every session we would put on a piece of music and we would just blow bubbles over the kids, and actually there would be this amazing sense of God's presence and stillness as we did that. Parachute prayer, so lying under a parachute or doing parachute games and praying as you do that. Clay or putty, like anything that you can mold and shape. I should have got it out because I can't get it out of the pot. It takes ages. But anything that you can mold and shape, and again, as you move, like listening to God. Lotion, doing a hand massage, if you've got consent, or getting kids to do that for themselves, and praying that we know God's presence and feeling kind of in our bodies, and giving choices. So you might have a picture of family and a picture of nature, and you might get a child to choose which picture they want to pray for, and any child, whether they are verbal or non-verbal, can pick. Either physically, or sometimes children, particularly with cerebral palsy, might pick with their eyes, so they might look at the one that they want you to pick. Object response, so the kind of thing, oh, I just pressed that button by accident. Object response, the thing that we were just thinking about, so looking for an object or using objects as a way to pray. So I've seen before where there's if you're praying for healing, you could use a doll and some stickers and ask children to stick stickers as they pray, and that might lead you to pray for healing particular parts of the body. The thing I love about community is, and the way that God talks about community, is that he's always drawing in the one. It's always about enabling the people who are from the on the edges to be able to be a part of the whole, and we want to be able to do that in the way that we do ministry. And I think the most important thing in that is that rather than just making changes for one individual, or being like, oh, don't know how to engage that child or young person in prayer, what we can do is we can do activities that actually enable everyone to connect with God in different ways, and enable everyone to have that opportunity to really be hearing and listening to him. So just going to run through those questions that were on the blurb to make sure that we have actually covered them. So how do I support someone who is non-verbal to hear from God? Well, we've talked about lots of different ways that you can do that, and really I would say the main thing is thinking about those senses and thinking about how we engage in different kind of different practical ways. So whether that is through moving, whether it's through blowing some bubbles, whether it's through making a choice. And the interesting thing about individuals being non-verbal is they'll obviously have different levels of cognitive ability. So there might be an individual who is non-verbal, but who is very bright and has a learning ability at the same level as their classmates, and they might have a different communication system where they use symbols perhaps to communicate, or even a computer to talk for them, or look with their eyes to make choices. And that individual might want to communicate and pray and hear from God in quite a different way to an individual who perhaps is non-verbal and has a much lower learning level and is engaging at a more sensory level in the way that they're learning. So for that individual, you might want to do more of the kind of practical activities of praying as you do different things. But you can also still give choice, and you can still also, God is a God who is beyond any like any assumption that the world has about someone's ability or non-ability. And I love to be praying as I work with all children and people, like, God, help me to see what you see, and help me to be responding as you would want me to respond, and to see ability rather than non-ability in the way that I'm doing things. What do I do when a young person with autism finds it difficult to picture what God is saying because they think very literally? I've had some interesting chats with, lots of individuals with autism, but one particular young man who I think he must have been 14 or so, who was really cross and angry and did not want to join in with anything that was happening at an event that I was working at, because he didn't think that God wanted to speak to him. He couldn't hear what God is saying, and he just didn't want to go there. I think what we unpacked is that actually because he did think quite literally, he was expecting God to speak to him kind of audibly. When people talk about hearing from God, he was expecting to hear a voice or to really clearly know what God was saying. And obviously, some people do hear God in that way, but that isn't always the way that we hear from God. And one of the resources I found really helpful for this is Chat and Catch, Rachel Turner's idea, which is on the Parenting for Faith website, which is a brilliant resource if you haven't been there already. But it's all about talking to God in the everyday, chatting to God about your everyday things and catching from him in the everyday things. And it gives examples of how we can picture what God's saying to us, just like if you picture your favorite food in your head, that's the kind of space in your head where God can talk to you. And that she kind of gives the structure and idea of like how God can speak to us just in our thoughts and the things that we're doing every day. So you might tell God what you had for breakfast, and you might ask God, if you can play a game with me right now, what game would you play? Now, probably for all of you, a game has popped into your head, and obviously, you do this in a kind of prayerful way that's like, okay, God, like, please can you speak through my thoughts and through this process. But the way that it can be helpful is because a game will probably pop into a child's head if you ask that kind of question. It enables them to really realize that God can speak through the way that we think and through the way that we kind of just go about our everyday. And then they can say, hey, why that game, God? Why do you want to play Snakes and Ladders with me, or whatever it is? So hopefully that answers that question. How do I engage a young person with a learning disability in understanding the concept of God speaking to us? So it really depends on the individual, but some of those things, like those symbols, can really help. And again, things like Chat and Catch, or just doing activities in different ways. So, using all of those different senses can really help, I think, children and young people to really experience God and connect with him for themselves. I think, that's a really important thing to notice and to remember, isn't it, that we're all made uniquely. Each and every one of us hear from God in different ways and respond to him in different ways, and he loves that he's made us uniquely. And it's about enabling the children and people that we're with to be able to kind of have lots of opportunity to connect with God, and to know that God can connect with them in lots of different ways, and to be able to respond to him from that. Great. That's the end. We've got about 10 minutes for questions if people have questions that they would like to ask, but hopefully you found that helpful.
We did have one very practical question, Naomi, which was whether the How Does Your Engine Run triangle is available online anywhere? Do you know if it is?
I don't know if it is, to be honest. I think it's because it's part of the actual training course. But if it is going to be available anywhere, it would be on their website, which is Alert Program spelt the American way .com. Program spelt the American way.
Great, thank you. We'll make sure we put links to all the resources that Naomi's mentioned and all the websites once we post the video up on YouTube on the Well Learning Hub channel. Thanks, Naomi. Last chance for any other questions.
Yeah, so happy to answer any. I know that it's often a lot of information to take in when we talk about sensory processing and yeah, hearing from God in different ways. But yeah, any specific questions about particular children, young people that you're trying to engage, or yeah, particular ideas that you would like more information about how to implement, happy to answer those, or not if people are happy.
Just allowing a few minutes, because it could be that people are shy, or it could be that people are taking the time to type out a really complicated question. So I won't close the webinar until we've given people a chance to type.
Yeah, totally fair enough.
Oh, there's 2 come in at once. So from Helen, she's just saying it's really useful and interesting and a huge amount of information to take in. So thank you, Helen. And then Dion, do you feel this is relevant to all abilities? My reflection is that it can benefit all young people, which I think is fair.
Yeah, absolutely. I would, 100% agree with that, Dion. I think, yeah, and if we think about that, changes for all rather than changes for one thing, it's just so important to be able to, in my mind, incorporate all of these things into everything that we're doing. And you know, as an occupational therapist, it's the kind of thing I'm telling teachers all the time, like, all of these things will help all the children in your classroom, so you should do them for everyone. Rather, you know, I benefit from going on a run and having movement breaks just as much as someone who you know, may have sensory processing difficulties may benefit from going for a run and having some movement breaks. So yeah, completely. And I think actually for all of us, you know, whether we're 0 or 100, learning to engage with God in all of these different ways, and like, you know, just like I was saying then about all of us being unique, actually, I think we can really learn more of God's character by trying some of these things and thinking about, okay, God, how are you speaking to me through the way that I'm seeing, or through the way that I'm feeling, or what I'm hearing, or, you know, the way I'm moving. Yeah, so completely agree.
Thank you, Naomi. I'm going to assume that means that nobody else has any questions. As you say, they're probably taking all the brilliant information you've shared with us this evening on board and processing it. Oh, I spoke too soon. There is one more that's come in. Okay, if you use some of these ideas, would you mix them in with traditional things as well? That's a question from Anita.
Yes. Yeah, absolutely. So I think, you know, obviously learning the more traditional ways of talking to God and praying and engaging in prayer, you know, lots of people really benefit from those ways of chatting and listening to God as well. So I think, yeah, it's about kind of I guess being able to have a breadth of those more creative ways of, and you know, you can do them in a main service, like where I've done stuff where, you know, everyone's had a pebble and the prayer thing is to like put your pebbles at the foot of a cross, or you know, I've often will give people something that they end up taking home, and that's like a reminder of something that they can be praying about, or a way they can ask God to speak to them that week. So there are things that you can do kind of alongside, you know, even more corporate prayer and listening, or individual, but yeah, completely.
Great, thank you, Naomi. Just pausing just in case of any more coming in, because I spoke too soon last time.
Yeah.
4 minutes technically.
Yeah.
Okay, I don't think we're going to have any more questions tonight. So I guess just to say thank you, Naomi, and to repeat that we will put this webinar up on the Well Learning Hub YouTube channel in the next few days. And alongside the video, we'll make sure we include links to lots of useful websites and resources that Naomi has mentioned. Thank you so much for giving us some time this evening to join us, and thank you one last time to Naomi. Have a nice evening, everybody.